Oxford County Council, in their inestimable wisdom, have decided their city should be split into 6 15-minute neighbourhoods. Residents will be allowed to drive out of their zone 100 times a year. Any subsequent trips will attract a fine. A council spokesman has said it's about having all essential needs met within a 15-minute of home. Critics, however, say it will hurt businesses. Joining me now to discuss the pros and cons is Niall Crowley, who has campaigned against such measures. Thanks for joining me, Niall. First of all, is this just another front in the endless war on the car and indeed people's freedom of movement?
I think it's definitely an attack on, well, I see on people's freedom of movement, but also people's living standards. I grew up without a car. My community, there were very few people had cars, and that was only 30, 40 years ago. No central heating either. So I think it's a relatively short amount of time that ordinary people have been able to afford such things, and now we're being told to give them up straight away. Because of problems of the climate, and it's what's been announced in Oxford has really blown up. I think if you try and look up the article, the first thing you get is that it's been fact-checked and proved to be false. Facebook are actually stopping the article going up, and really the facts of the meat of the piece was announced in October, that they're, as you say, they're dividing Oxford up into 6 zones that you can only leave a certain amount of times. And Canterbury have announced a similar thing with 5 zones. Derbyshire Council are putting AMPR cameras across the city to monitor people's movements.
It gives them the right to operate like this. Councillors. What gives them the authority to deem whether or not it's appropriate for a private person to go about their business in the way in which they want to do?
I think people have ignored, that people have become very disaffected with local democracy, so they become, there's also almost an attitude of letting them get on with it, as long as they fix the drains and run local services. But things have been really changing over the last few years. They've learned to operate with very few checks and balances, and I think that they put the cart before the horse, if you like. Rather than them being elected representatives answerable to us, we are becoming more and more answerable to them, and they're doing much more authoritarian things. And because it's not on a local level, I think it's going under the radar a little. So I was in Tottenham this week, where there's a lot of low traffic neighbourhoods coming in over the past few weeks. And people there don't know what's going on in Hackney. People in Islington don't know what's going on in Hackney. And I think it's starting to shift now. And I think they've probably done us a favour.
What people? Starting to shift?
I think the pro-LTM, pro-road closure, they call it active travel. It's presented in a very positive way. It's about low traffic neighbourhoods. It's about making streets more friendly and safe. But really, the main thing is about climate. I've said from the start, they're not really interested in, safer neighbourhoods or anything. It's about carbon and climate, and we are just numbers to be moved on a graph, really. And that's really, really frightening. But just on these moments like this, when a politician lets slip what they're really doing, and people take a bit of a step back and say, wow, is that what this is about? And the idea of zoning cities really frightens people. It conjures up, Eastern Europe, China. There's something sci-fi about it, isn't there?
And so it should.
Absolutely.
In essence, for thousands of years, the idea of living in a city was the connectedness of it. Everyone was whatever within the city boundaries, and theoretically you could move wherever. Yes, you would have your home, and you would have a local area, but it was the connectivity of it and the connectedness of it to all of those people and all of that potential that was the raison d'etre for there being a city.
Yeah. And beyond that as well. Beyond that, I think about how a nation works. Our nation. I started out on this writing about what was going on in Islington two years ago during lockdown, because it was one of the first places where it started. And the people of Islington marched from Islington Town Hall along the A1. And when I was reading and writing for it, the significance of the A1 really jumped out at me. I mean, it's, you'd know better than me that it's a pre-Roman road, and it's the longest road in Britain, and it goes, technically goes all the way from England to Scotland. And yeah, it's an incredible thing. And you think about the progress that has been made in bringing us together as a nation.
What do we do? I mean, increasingly people ask me, what do we do? And all I can do really with that is ask other people in this context, what should we do to persuade or to remind people like Oxfordshire County Council that we will not be told how to live our lives, that is not their remit?
It's an interesting dilemma. I've been following and working a little bit with the Together campaign that have done a lot of work, really successful work with fighting the lockdown and the vaccine passports, and had a lot of success there. And what they want to do, which is something that really appealed to me, is really just find ways of putting the public back at the centre of things. Because I think politicians at the moment know that they can ignore the public. They're more interested in the views of a few cycling campaigns, but the public is so kind of fragmented. I mean, we need a coherent kind of vehicle, really, that will push our views into the centre of public
such a dilemma
public
for
life.
people, though, because in the past, generations past, it would have been the council, the town council, the parish council, or whatever would have been that place to which people would have taken their concerns, and they would have expected action, and they would have expected it to be, moved up the chain of command, and they would have expected resolution. Yeah. But now that it's a top-down thing, now the diktats just come from on high, and councillors indulge themselves in thinking that they wield the power.
I think it's kind of a product of the last 30, 40 years of political disengagement. If you remember before Brexit, there was a lot of, we need to engage the public, we need to engage, what do we do, get them to vote in supermarkets. And as soon as you ask the public what they think, they would, they gave the wrong answer. So I think our political class, if you want to call it that, are adept now at being self-sufficient and keeping the public at bay. It's really interesting that whenever the councils come into contact with the public over low traffic neighbourhoods and any of these issues, they react by accusing people of racism, xenophobia, bigotry, violence. The leader of Haringey Council used all of those terms last week about a small, peaceful demo, and also made comparisons with the Capitol Hill, January the 6th. It felt a bit like Capitol Hill. This is the language they use against the public,
It does beg the question, who do they think they are?
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
You mentioned earlier, for me, the whole thing is a smokescreen or a sleight of hand to distract us from climate lockdown. And I think this is what this is. I think these types of schemes, and many more to come, are because of this obsession with getting people pinned down, atomised, isolated, locked off in smaller and smaller spaces under the guise of,
I mean, I think it is heading that way. I don't think there's any grand plan. I think they're just grappling around in the dark, really. I think that kind of managed decline idea is probably where we're going. There is no vision from our politicians. Excuse me. So really all they're doing is just managing decline, and on the idea of opening a coal station or a coal plant or a nuclear power station or anything like that is, reacted to with horror, and all we can do is just buckle down, So save what we've got. It's almost like put on a war footing where we all just have to have rations. But I might be wrong, but I don't see any great.
They seem to be selling us pessimism. They seem to be telling us prepare for the worst all the time about everything. To do with the war in Ukraine, to do with disease, to do with climate.
Yeah.
Everything is just prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
It's bad now, and it's going to get worse.
Yeah, but I would say my experience of working with people, the public, and campaigns on that is that there's enormous amounts of potential, very smart people. I think we can, address these things and solve a lot of our problems. The public are very, very resourceful, and it's just a shame that such talent is just kind of pushed to the side.
Aren't people forced again and again and again in the direction of civil disobedience? You know, if you live in a city that's being controlled in this way, and it's affecting your ability to earn a living, it's affecting your mental health or whatever, people, you know, ought to defy it en masse.
Yeah,
ultimately,
you said that, not me.
If no one's listening,
yeah, but you wouldn't blame them, would you? Really? I mean, in Hackney and Islington, where I've been working, people were accused of doing all kinds of things they hadn't actually done. Well, at the same time, our mayor supports, actively supports Extinction Rebellion, and these organisations that are actually attacking art and causing havoc and civil disobedience. I think that the British public is actually probably a bit too well behaved at the moment, and we do need to find ways of putting ourselves back right at the centre of things.
And even if it was about the city, what about people? If you take a typical city, there will be poor places, there will be under-resourced places, areas, territories, whatever you want to call them, and there will be those that have it all. That have all the nice shishi bars and restaurants and the art galleries and whatever. So what becomes of people who their designated zone is one of deprivation?
Yeah.
And they're told that they stay there, and that they can't even go to or aspire to, ultimately reaching the better parts of the city.
No, absolutely.
Psychologically, what is the impact?
Well, if you think about public transport, I mean, we're lucky in London, but I was in Birmingham a couple of weeks back and was reminded of my childhood by waiting for a bus for 45 minutes in the cold and rain. And, the public transport is not great in many parts of the country, and resources and the things, as you said, the things that are available to people. So it's about forcing down our expectations, It's not been that long since we were able to go abroad and travel and see all of those things.
Yes, remember those days?
Yeah, and, I don't know about you, but I grew up with no central heating. By the way, Islington Council are actually turning down people's communal heating at the moment, which is pretty shocking, which is, I think is pretty kind of part of that expect less. You've got to expect less,
I say again, how dare they. Neil Crowley, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much.